Hello and welcome. I'm Tyree, your host for Poems Spoken, a venue where poets are asked to speak their poetry, providing soul and music beyond the already rich meaning of their words. This is the inaugural episode of Poems Spoken, so it will be a little different than the following episodes, as I will be reading from my own chapbook titled Wars Kill People. So now I will turn the camera over to my guest, Tyree. By way of introduction, I think of myself as a poet hiding in an engineer's mind. I have been writing poetry since grade school, almost 70 years. I am also a war orphan, one of the reasons I write about anti-war. When I was 5 months old, my father's unit was deployed to Europe to serve as replacements for the servicemen who were expected to be casualties in the invasion of Europe on June 6, 1944. He and his unit of the 101st Airborne Division disembarked in England on D-Day as thousands of their comrades stormed and 4,000 died on the beaches of Normandy. His first combat was September 17, 1944, when his unit parachuted into Holland as part of the largest airborne operation before or since, Market Garden. After 3 days of combat, he was wounded in the thigh and evacuated back to England for recuperation. He healed and was transferred to a base in France. On December 16, 1944, during one of the coldest winters on record, the German army began a last-ditch assault in the Ardennes forest, and my father's unit was hastily loaded into trucks and moved to Bastogne, Belgium, and told to hold the town, with its important road and rail hub. While fighting off a tank attack on January 3, 1945, just 4 days after my first birthday, he was struck by a tank shell and died instantly. He is buried in the American Military Cemetery in Luxembourg City. It is appropriate, but also maddening, that as we are experiencing another war between supposedly civilized countries, I choose to write and read anti-war poems. I haven't yet penned a poem about the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, but I will. This chapbook starts with the European invasion of America, works through many conflicts, and ends with the American war in Afghanistan. After each poem, I have inserted a few facts that I think give some context to the poems. Invasion of America. The people came in the time before, spreading across the land, living with the land, sharing the land with the herds, and the land was fertile and provided for the people. What was not needed was left for another. Then the Europeans discovered the land. Spanish, English, Portuguese, and French, from cultures that were taught to own the land, that harvested and stored the bounty of the land, that drew boundaries and built fences and walls. And what was not needed was kept. And the invaders brought germs and pushed the people off ancestral lands that provided plenty into reservations that provided little. Killed the herds of bison for fashion, let the food rot, and then took the land of the reservations away. And now the people live in squalor, uncounted and unappreciated, as they fight to exist, fight to honor the past and all of our ancestors who lived well with the land. And the civilized invaders called the people heathens. Some estimates suggest that 90% of the indigenous people in Americas died within the first 2 generations after the Europeans came. That's 20 million people in maybe 50 years. There's nothing civil about war. Some called it the Civil War, others the war between the states. By any name, it was insurrection with obscure cause and death as an end. The real test of a country's will to survive and grow, the first war photographed recording pain and carnage. Vicksburg, the Wilderness, Shiloh, Chickamauga, Gettysburg, and bloody Antietam's single day cost both sides 23,000 men. Fighting on land and sea, battles of brother against brother, weapons of war outpaced the means of saving lives. Doctors were overwhelmed. Men died from disease and battle until the toll became obscene. It should have ended at Appomattox Courthouse, where men who stood as brothers and learned the art of war in the same classroom met to end the slaughter. It struggled on for 2 more months, with men dying, until Juneteenth finished the war and began the Reconstruction. It's not over. It still stains the souls of the side that surrendered that day. It still resonates with those that feel threatened. There were more American men lost in the Civil War than any other war we fought in. The war to end all war. The introduction of modern warfare, finding more efficient ways of killing and wounding combatants and civilians, tanks, planes, and poison gas, finding new ways to kill and maim, create death spanning continents and injuries spawning crippled bodies, fueling pandemic. Militarism, alliances, imperialism and nationalism, humiliation and anger spiraled into hate and shame, building resentment and preparing for a new war. Imperial dynasties crumbling. Women in the workplace, force, social upheaval, African Americans in uniform, winning medals, but still unable to ride the front of the bus. The war to end all wars changed the world, but it didn't end all wars, simply set the stage. In World War I, something in the order of 27 million soldiers and 13 million civilians were collateral damage. 2 lives. She stood, dark eyes peering through fences at the desert sands, the Gila River without any water, internment camp in the land of the free, homes, cars, bank accounts torn away. Bewildered civilians herded like cattle trapped behind barbed wire, far from the only home she knew, the land of her birth, California. When the god of light fell from an empty sky and smoked the land of the rising sun, earth and flesh and molten glass swirled up, pulsing mushroom cloud over Hiroshima. He stood knee-deep in a rice paddy, bent over, plunging new green plants in the fertile black soil. Light, sound, wind swept a city away, left the paddy unchanged, changed the world forever. Together, quietly living the way, accepting what is and what will be, raising a family to know the good, in all people to know that only people care. I know a couple. The mother was in an internment camp in California when the bomb dropped at Hiroshima. The father was in a rice paddy planting rice. They came together in the United States, are U.S. citizens, and have children here in the United States. 2 men talking in a crowded station. I have a lovely wife and 2 fine sons. I wrote her only yesterday, complaining of my coming birthday. I would have been an old man of 30. Now I'll grow no older, nor complain again. I envy you, your wife in 30 years. I'm just 19. Planned to marry Elsa. She died in a city bombed to rubble. I died in a burning tank. A tank it was that killed me also, sitting on a distant ridge, firing 88s, screaming and crashing among my men, shredding them on the frozen ground. No tank it was that killed you, Rather, a man who aimed that gun, pulled the lanyard that released that shell. It was my hand that burst your heart out. Night now. They won't find my battered body until morning. Warmth all gone. Flesh frozen, unrecognizable. Those shells make a mess. I hope they send my letters home. Don't you care that I sent that shell that took you from your family, killed your men? Don't you care that the carnage isn't over, that there's more useless battles to be fought? You expect me to cry vengeance, to hate your soul? Hate's what brought us here. Now we're here together, all of us, our broken bodies strewn like windfall, across the snowy fields among the woods. We'll none of us win in the end, even though we fight to the death. Look, they're burying us in separate cemeteries, as if we care. Winter War. If I lie down this night, I'll not get up tomorrow. This frozen ground will draw my warmth, leave me stiff and dead, surely as bullet or bayonet. So I crouch on stolen straw, listen for the sounds of battle that rip the stillness of the night, metallic clanking of savage tanks, foraging like prehistoric beasts for frozen fodder in clinging fog. Sibilant whispers of artillery rounds arch like rainbows through the night. Bring gore instead of gold for those who find the rainbows in. Harsh breaths from my enemy in white, stalking closer tree by tree. My death, their only hope for life. This simple crossroads town welcomed us, unprepared for winter or for war. Ammunition running low, freezing feet and worn-out boots. Our battle dress provides no camouflage against the snow. Surrounded, our command is clear. No surrender. Hold the ground. Help is on the way. Clear skies will bring the planes, carrying food, medicine, ammunition. Clearing skies will bring the planes, sudden death for other lonesome boys who crouch on stolen straw, listen for the sounds of battles that stir the stillness of the night. The Battle of the Bulge was fought in one of the coldest winters in the history of Europe. Military Cemetery. The fallen have decayed long since to enrich this foreign soil. Their marble monuments now stand passively aloof to speak of sacrifice and courage, death, fear, and carnage. Here, white on white, the crosses flood the snowy slopes, bearing 3 short lines to chronicle each life, record each soul. Only these few words are left to the relentless enemy. Thousands of lives end here, wasted by a war fought long ago, for a reason we who come to question refuse to understand. This is where your grandfather lies, sons. I never knew him either. Coming home. It was hard, standing on the platform waiting with Granddaddy Jake to meet his son. It's raining in Virginia. The rails glisten, polished in the falling mist. Duncan's coming home. Home from the war in Korea, a hero, a dead hero. Shoulders hunched under raincoats, we wait in silence, watching the rain on the rails. He had led his men through mud and enemy fire to take a nameless hill, then led them back down again, leaving it to the enemy. We heard the train whistling for the river crossing where the tall trestle stands. He stayed behind to make sure his men were safe, and now he's coming home. My uncle Duncan Alexander MacLeod died in Korea May 18th, 1951. Turn away. We woke to the sounds of death today. We woke with the cries of dying children. We woke from the pain of starvation again. How can you turn away? It's just a local conflict, you say, in a far-off place with silly names like Dubrovnik, Split, and Sarajevo. So it's easy to turn away. And I guess we goaded this carnage on by fostering hate instead of love, by choosing sides instead of friends. So go ahead, maybe it's okay to turn away. But the toll that this battle has asked us to pay climbs by the hundreds until, to our shame, the dead must wait in unburied piles. Now can you still turn away? It's killing children and raping mothers, slaughtering babies and everyone's sons. It's killing bakers and bankers and carpenters and people like you who turn away. The Great War to end all wars started here before you were born. Now we watch the blood run again. Again we watch you turn away. When you watch your child collapse with entrails trailing in the street, when you lie broken, breathing out blood, remember who turned away. That was the war in Yugoslavia from 1991 to 2001. Jungle War. It wasn't a welcome war, this war in the jungle. We had to choose between standing up for our country or standing up for our conscience. Our friends and classmates were torn between volunteering and fleeing to Canada, between risking life and family and staying safe and snug in the States. Protests became common and sometimes bloody, and endless newsreels documented the struggle and the atrocities when they occurred, so common in war. There were also moments of valor and compassion when warriors became savior and nurse, and wounded children were saved and succored and returned to their families. Almost 60,000 troops lost their lives in Vietnam, and many came back with lifetime trauma. Rwandan mother. I've grown too weary to clear my nostrils, clogged with death and sun-dried dust, stirring into swirling devils by furnace winds, by scuffling feet, seeking safety, seeking solace. The weight of the midday sun hanging just above pushes down on a dented pot with a rusted hole that perilously crowns a pile of ragged bedding, dragging endlessly along the foreign road, heaped upon another soul-spent traveler. Aching limbs, grotesque joints, parchment skin stretched thin, hang among tattered bits of cloth. Round dark eyes float, disembodied beneath a single dirty fold, arranged to shade a dying face. One more child, dead among the many, laid rank upon unending rank beside this endless tramp of broken families. I've laid my daughter in a pile, picked up another son. In a separate pile laid that one. I sit and watch with another child, feebly tugging at my withered breast, because brother must kill brother until only the dead are left. From April to July of 1994, somewhere between 500 and 800,000 Tutsi people were slaughtered. Same God, different churches. This is a story of divided Ireland, Catholics and Protestants, Christians both told to love your neighbor as yourself. It began in 1641 with Irish Catholics fighting British Protestants. Us versus them, but we are all the same. the boundaries that separate us are simple lines on a map or different ways of reading the same words. And thousands die in undeclared war. Later, they called the undeclared war the Troubles and pitted loyalist Protestant against nationalist Catholics. Each side stated high ideals, but slaughtered civilians without shame. The Catholics want to govern themselves. The Protestants want them to be part of a greater whole. And over this esoteric choice, they fight and die. For 30 years, neighbors killed neighbors until 3,500 died and 50,000 suffered injury. And no one wins in the end. Mountain Empire. This land has known war, tribe against tribe, since time began. And this land became a pawn in the great game when expansion became a national imperative. The British Empire failed here thrice, beaten by people fighting for their own land. The Soviet homogeny stumbled and bled and failed here twice, and the Taliban grew strong. And then America and NATO tried and failed in the longest war, and the land remains, and the people remain, and fighting tribes persists, and the dying continues. Let me finish with something that's just a thought, and not sure it makes any sense, but here it is. The last soldier but one. Would I kill so I could claim that it was I who ended all war? Or would I die, were I the last soldier but one, so he would have no one left to kill? Thank you for listening. I hope you got some enjoyment out of these expressions of my feelings about how we treat each other. Wow. Thank you, Ty. That was an impressive tour of some great poetry. What struck me in your recitation was the different voices that seemed to speak as we moved through the history of war. Each poem wanted to stand alone and sing in a different tone. With that, we'll say goodbye to Tyree and ask you to click the subscribe button below and ring the bell so that you can be notified when we go live with another poet reading original works for your enjoyment. We would love to have your support, and tips can be dropped in Venmo at Tower Hour. If you are interested in being a guest on Poems Spoken, please email us at ty.tyree@waoinc.org. The address is also shown below in the show notes. We will send you a link, and you can use your browser to sign in, and you don't have to download anything. Okay, we'll end this episode here and wish you good writing and speaking your poetry.